Hi everyone, this is Steve Sterling. Welcome to Sentinel 17 Gaming. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when I upload any new content. With that being said, let's get into it. In today's video, I'm talking about Grand Theft Auto. We'll start with Grand Theft Auto 3, which came out way back in 2001. Now when Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, a lot about video games was different than it is nowadays. It was not as mature by any means. Sure, you had games like Mortal Kombat, but Grand Theft Auto 3 really gave parents groups something to be angry about because of the level of mature content and violence that was readily accessible to the gamer. With Grand Theft Auto 3, it was the first game of its type to really just let the player loose and allow the player to explore, to do whatever they wanted within a huge sandbox style game. A lot of people were drawn into this concept, but into the storyline as well. The mature storyline, one that saw you as basically a no-name thug working for the mafia, eventually working for the Yakuzas and a number of other shady groups, as a way to make money, as a way to navigate your way through the underworld of this fictional Liberty City. And it was how it was written, as well as the world that it was written in, that really drew gamers into it and made Grand Theft Auto 3 truly a memorable game that helped to revolutionize the video game industry practically overnight. After Grand Theft Auto 3, everybody knew there was another Grand Theft Auto game coming, and a lot of people assumed it would be Grand Theft Auto 4. However, Rockstar announced that the next Grand Theft Auto game is actually called Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and it's set in the 1980s. Now, the game had tons of 80s music from different genres, and it was essentially, the entire game was a love letter to the 1980s, to a lot of the ridiculousness, the neon lights, the music, the hair, the way people dress, the way people act. And you see a lot of what is in Grand Theft Auto Vice City, taking hints and cues from a lot of what was in television and movies at the time. It's like a love letter basically from Rockstar to the 1980s, and that dedication to the 1980s culture is what made Vice City so memorable. Of course, the Hauser brothers, moving on from Vice City, went to make Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which instead of relying on music and neon lights, it relies on the gritty feel of gang warfare in LA in the 1990s, although it's a fictional version of LA called Los Santos. The storyline is just as memorable, and you play as a character who has definitely tons of problems, not only with rival gangs, but with corrupt cops. Again, in real life in the 1990s, there was a big problem with the LAPD getting in trouble with corruption regarding how they were basically abusing their power. And you see a lot of that as a big part in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. That's central to the storyline, in fact. So at this point in the video, you're probably like, well, why are you giving me a recap of these Grand Theft Auto games that pretty much started it all? It's because of where I'm going with this. Now, Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, San Andreas had truly memorable stories. They were built as single player first, and there wasn't really a multiplayer component other than like in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. But the multiplayer component is not what the game was built around. The game was built around single player content, a single player story. You know, and back in the PlayStation 2 days, there was not the internet connectivity that there is nowadays. By the time Grand Theft Auto 4 rolled around in the mid-2000s, and it debuted for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, both of those devices were able to connect to the internet, which increased the potential for the franchise going forward. Now with Grand Theft Auto 4, of course, when they started, they possibly had an idea about where they wanted to go for downloadable content, single player expansions, so to speak, with some of the characters that might have been shown, but people didn't necessarily know if they were going to be involved in significant storylines. The beautiful part about Grand Theft Auto 4, though, is the way they crafted the world. So many of these different characters all had stories of their own. Sure, the main protagonist, Niko Bellic, he comes from a war-torn background, but there were two characters, Johnny Klebitz and Luis Lopez, that are seen at different parts in Grand Theft Auto 4, and they are actually the protagonists for the single-player DLCs, The Lost and Damned and The Ballad of Gay Tony. The first one, The Lost and Damned, is about the biker gangs going on in Liberty City during the times of Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, the biker Johnny, shown in this clip here, is actually the de facto leader of the biker gang, The Lost. And there's an internal power struggle going on. There's a storyline that involves him and sees him go through significant struggle against various antagonists, both internal and external. But the way the storyline was written really drew you in. It gave you a reason to come back to Liberty City and actually care about him. Luis Lopez, as you see in this clip here, is another character that you see several times in Grand Theft Auto 4. When you're playing as Niko Bellic, you see this character Luis. You see him at the bank when the bank is getting robbed. You also see him at the museum, basically causing the calamity that adds to some of the significant complications later in the story of Grand Theft Auto 4. But the whole thing is you have two memorable characters that weren't initially protagonists that were expanded upon by Rockstar as part of their single-player DLC content. And I think that's what really excited the gamers, is the fact that now you can play as characters that weren't necessarily primary antagonists, but they have stories of their own that are so exciting and so layered that it keeps you wanting to come back to the game to experience Liberty City all over again. And I know going into Grand Theft Auto 5, a lot of people were really looking forward to that. The possibility of single-player DLC, expanding upon the main characters of the game. Now with Grand Theft Auto 5, it was pretty much a given that there was going to be single-player DLC, because Episodes of Liberty City, which was the two DLCs for Grand Theft Auto 4 basically combined into one package, was extremely well received. Tons of people liked it, and it was just very successful for Rockstar. So with Grand Theft Auto 5 having three protagonists, three memorable protagonists, Michael DeSanta, Franklin Clinton, and Trevor Phillips, it was pretty much a given that there was going to be some type of single-player DLC. And Grand Theft Auto 5 actually had single-player DLC planned at some point by Rockstar, but the decision was made to cancel it. While a lot of us suspected that Grand Theft Auto Online was to blame for the single-player DLC getting canceled for Grand Theft Auto 5, Rockstar actually came out and talked about this. Now, they didn't mention it per se, because I think that would be damaging to the brand if they actually admitted, hey, you know what, we wanted to take your money more than we did, to invest in a single-player DLC and give you a quality experience. They talked about this saying, hey, it just kind of happened. Whereas before, people were kind of like, there's no proof there was even a single-player DLC planned. Well, yeah, now they came out and said, hey, it was, but unfortunately, it just kind of got canceled. And I think a lot of that goes back to Take-Two Interactive now running the show, because Take-Two is the parent company of Rockstar. They call the shots. You have the whole fiasco with NBA 2K20 being such a microtransaction-filled mess. And I think Strauss Zelnick, which is the top guy at Take-Two Interactive, is the guy to blame. He is kind of like the Andrew Wilson of Take-Two. And him wanting his company to be profitable over actually giving the gamers a quality product, I think that's the problem. And with Grand Theft Auto having been a franchise that was so instrumental in building and crafting open world games where single players can get out there and actually just enjoy running wild and doing things that you can't do in the real world, and being able to do it without repercussions, I think that is what helped to build the open world sandbox genre, and the fact that they're now saying, hey, you know what, we don't really care that much about single player. That we're just going to choose the profits for Grand Theft Auto Online over any single player expansions. I think that's troublesome. I'm going to link the article to Forbes below. And again, just feel free to leave me your comments, your thoughts on the matter. But this is concerning because going forward, I mean, hell, for all we know, Grand Theft Auto 6 could be free to play. They could say, hey, there's no cost at all. You know, you just got to pay for microtransactions. You want a car in Grand Theft Auto 6, you want a submachine gun, you want the ammo for that submachine gun, you want a rocket launcher, buy a shark card, you know. And I think that sets a very dangerous precedent going forward that everybody needs to be mindful of. And I think as the situation develops, us as consumers need to make the best decision to tell Rockstar and Take-Two that this is not alright. Again, what are your thoughts on this matter? I'd love to hear it below. Feel free to leave any comments, and feel free to share this video if you do like it. Thank you. This is Steve Sterling with Sentinel 17 Gaming.